Hello, all, and welcome to our next session, Efficient, Accessible, and Compliant Public Sector Data. Thank you so much for attending FormFest today. I know we've had a series of exciting sessions already today. They're not done yet. I hope you stick around for more of our afternoon sessions, and especially if you are a current customer, I hope to see you next. The next time you'll see me beyond this session is our customer roundtable this afternoon. I'm really excited to hear your feedback, how you're using FormAssembly. I hope you join that session as well. Before we get started with today's session, I do want to just call out that you do have some resource links that Dave and Dan will be discussing with you a little bit later today. So feel free to follow those resource links if you decide that you need some documentation on FormAssembly or want to visit our sam.gov listing. But that's enough housekeeping. I think you know how a webinar works. I want to introduce you to Dan and Dave, who are joining us today. Gentlemen, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
I appreciate it.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. My name is Dan Petrie. I am the partner account manager for the Department of Defense, to some extent the PubSec side of the equation, as well as the federal government. And I'm very excited to present FormAssembly, especially from the standpoint of the DoD, the FedGov, and how we can really work with our partners and customers in providing an excellent product and service. That said, David?
Thanks, Dan. My name is David Scavetta. I'm the Director of Security and Compliance here at FormAssembly. I've been here for about 4 years. I've worked in the industry for close to 20 now. My bread and butter is keeping our people, our technology, and our customers safe. And Dan and I work pretty closely, especially as it relates to our product and services in the federal and agency-oriented space. So I'd like to talk a little more about, before we get into what FormAssembly does, let's get into what kind of keeps most agencies up at night. Because if you're in this room, you're probably living some of these issues and challenges right now. The alphabet soup on this slide is actually kind of intentional. So we have FISMA, NIST 853, FedRAMP CUI requirements. Very likely, if you're not familiar with these, you've certainly heard of them. These are generally baselines. In many cases, they are firm requirements. And the challenge isn't just meeting them, it's proving that you meet all of them consistently. So how do you prove that to auditors that very often have their own checklists? Every tool in your stack can't necessarily demonstrate compliance on its own, because they're looking for documentation, they're looking for evidence. So when we dive into specifics like the burden of paper and process optimization opportunities, the reality that most agencies don't really talk about is even after some of these digital first mandates, the actual workflow can often involve someone printing a form, scanning it back in, manually keying in certain details. And when you kind of hone in on that, there's a lot of opportunities for data to be entered wrong. It's still quite time consuming, and it still doesn't really follow the spirit of a lot of these digital first mandates. Shadow PDFs and manual reentry aren't really just slow. They're not positioned to really do well for a lot of these compliance standards. You also have security gaps and audit readiness. So a lot of these tools that may have been adopted years ago weren't really built for the current landscape. They may have worked well at the time, but may not have been suitable for where we are today with FedRAMP standards and a lot of the security control layers that most agencies tend to expect. And at that same time, agencies are often going through their own audits to kind of prove that they are meeting these standards. So when we talk about risk mitigation, this is probably the one that's worth highlighting most importantly here. We're not just talking about a theoretical risk, we're talking about a real risk that exists to ensure that your organization meets these general standards in terms of how it processes data. And where the real nuance there lies is how it captures that. How do your processes capture that information, how it flows into other systems, and how much of that is manual and spread out across maybe a number of different processes across an organization. So that's the problem space, but the good news is that FormAssembly is pretty well suited towards this particular challenge. And I'm going to bring it back to Dan, who's going to walk you a little more about how we're positioned in the federal and agency-oriented space.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. And the security and compliance side of the equation is so ultra important, especially in today's world. And with the DoD and the FedGov and public sector, the first questions are usually about security and compliance, and of course procurement, not necessarily product features. FormAssembly is already positioned for that reality with FedRAMP, high authorization, our IL4 qualified readiness, which is important on the security aspect, for the defense use cases where it matters. And SAM.gov listing is really to show you that we support government procurement. We even out any kind of hiccups that might happen from the standpoint of procuring our services, and it also validates FormAssembly, which means basically less friction, less risk across the board, and a faster path from review to deployment. So what we're really offering is a platform that's ready for partners and clients. In today's environment also, whether you are a partner, an existing customer, or a prospective customer, your priority is not just buying software. It's choosing a solution you can trust, deploy successfully, and use with confidence. FormAssembly's partner account motion, which I am the proponent of here, is designed around that customer reality. We help you yet navigate the evaluation, the procurement, the deployment, the adoption, and of course the growth as you grow for your needs. With a co-sell alignment and really partner planning, attribution and enablement, it's supported by a compliance posture that David mentioned that stands up in real security and procurement reviews. Basically, FormAssembly helps you achieve value faster and sustain it over time. As I'm sure the audience knows, the public sector procurement process for software can slow the mission down. It really can. Our goal is to make procurement faster and easier so that both the implementation partners and government entities that we're working with can get to work. And as Dave will show you, that's one of the many ways we help modernize your mission.
Thanks, Dan. So now you have an idea of generally how our platform operates from a compliant perspective and from a partner perspective. But let me show you what it actually does in terms of the mission, which Dan just alluded to. The biggest operational win that FormAssembly generally offers is really addressing the scan to digital workflow. So when data is put into FormAssembly forms and services, that record is born digitally. So the metadata is right there. It can flow to downstream systems that you have interconnected to access that data to prove or verify or whatever processes you may have in place. You're not chasing archivists down months later to try to capture an event set of data. The data is all generally right there. So the record set is compliant from the moment it hits the platform. And I would say that's generally not always a small thing. I know that For some organizations, the process, rather I should say the lag time between the data capture and having a proper record set once it's verified can take time. It's also extremely useful in addressing the paper and PDF administration tax. So, yeah, every time someone prints out a form, fills it out by hand, and someone else rekeys it, people make mistakes. There's human error. Departments change, organizations change, processes change, and it takes a much more streamlined approach to kind of address changes as they come at the source. So it reduces the need for shadow PDFs that you may have to chase down. The data goes right to the system of record. When we talk about enterprise-wide operations, this is where it gets really powerful at scale. Instead of every field office, every regional branch, every department silo, every group having their own kind of intake forms and intake processes, you can deploy standardized templates. You can deploy, take a more unified approach to your data collection so that for all your department functions that happen across your organization, you can kind of standardize that and collect that data consistently and uniformly through FormAssembly. And that standardization really opens the door to some real operational opportunities that go beyond just shifting away from paper-based changes. So one of the most common pain points that we hear is that a form may live in one place, but the system of records is another. So an organization will tend to need some reconciliation to make sure the two are consistent. And where you may have a number of different intake engines receiving that data, collecting it. Maybe it's by email, maybe it's another form collector, paper-based, what have you. Reconciling that can be quite time-consuming and prone to errors and mistakes. FormAssembly connects directly to a variety of services. So Salesforce in particular is our bread and butter. That means the system of record is generally the system of truth, assuming that Salesforce is your system of record. And it binds the information in real time as that data is collected. And that's the real strategic advantage right there. Also, as we focus on digital first financial readiness, so now we're thinking about payment collection and how your organization may interact with that. This creates a hard deadline. Agencies need to accept digital payments, move away from paper-based checks, things of that nature. FormAssembly lets you embed secure payment collection right in the form, depending upon how you collect payments, what integrations you have, and what data you kind of want to send where, and may vary on your organization and department, but it streamlines the whole thing kind of end to end, but can also be nuanced and configurable enough to account for different department needs. But compliance isn't always just about payments and security. There's another mandate that really, I would say, every single public agency interacts with. That's accessibility. So the 21st Century IDEA Act is pretty clear in what it's looking for. Federal digital services have to be accessible, and which becomes pretty difficult to meet when your organization may have paper-based data collection, or it needs to maybe adjust those PDFs to be accessible. It just makes things a bit more difficult. Our forms are tested against assistive technologies. So generally our platform works through the web browser. It's readable, So it does meet those WCAG standards, as well as we also have a mobile application as well. So here's the part that really matters. You don't need to, I would say, as a form assembly administrator, you don't need to know HTML and CSS to bring that to your form respondents, to the other folks who will be potentially using the platform. Platform natively handles labeling, the right structuring, depending upon your use case. Your subject matter expert can really focus on like building out the forms and collecting the data they need, rather than customizing, different pages to be accessible on a kind of a case-by-case basis. You can read a little more about our accessibility features at formassembly.com/accessibility. Probably has a much more comprehensive overview than I can present. But that said, let me show you a little more about what this looks like in practice. Now I'm going to show you one utility organization that, depending upon where you live, you may have interacted with. And that is the San Francisco Public Utilities. To give a little bit of background on this organization, they had a variety of different groups and departments and functions that were collecting data in a variety of different ways, using different tools, some of them older, some of them newer. And so it became kind of a multifaceted problem. Not only that you had multiple intakes for the collection of data, but also correlating all of that to a system of record and processing something across departments could be pretty painful. Also, there was a lot of overhead involved in verifying the data as it was actually collected, risks for, especially when you think about the public sector needing to get data and response data that's valid from real constituents, as at the same time you're sifting through that data to make sure it's clean, can be pretty tedious. So in Steps FormAssembly, we were able to work with them to consolidate everything onto a single unified platform to streamline their data collection, help build them out a number of templates, and help them learn to use our products and services so that they could really empower their admins to capture the use cases that each of their departments and functions had. The quote on the side really kind of says it all. It scales there with full accessibility, full compliance, and integrations to downstream systems, especially Salesforce. Again, that tends to be our bread and butter. So you've seen the challenges, solutions, and some bit of a story here. But Dan, I'd like to pass it back to you to kind of bring it home, talking a little more about why FormAssembly is the right partner for potentially you.
Thanks, David. And to really underline the importance of what David is saying, in this year, in 2026, the public sector organizations are really facing enormous pressure to modernize and become more efficient, which is exactly what FormAssembly is designed to do for our customers. And we work very close with you and your customers to make sure that happens. To give you an example, with some DoD medical deployments, example for their clinics, they're really facing some serious patient dissatisfaction. They may not express it verbally to the clinics, but they sure do it in their comment sections. And so it stems really from poor intake processes, the sheer volume of PDFs and forms that they have to adhere to. And as you have any experience in the Department of Defense, they live and die on forms. And that's really something we've solved for the private sector health care providers also many times over. And we're always looking for the opportunities like this. I love working with our partners and our customers to really solve their issues. And we want to provide tools to solve the inefficiencies that government entities have really learned to live with. A lot of these clinics, they just don't have the time to really kind of automate that. And that's where FormAssembly really comes in. And with our FedRAMP certification and our DoD IL4, they really don't they don't need to live with broken processes anymore. And in a lot of cases, they don't realize that these processes are really broken. They just say it's just the way of doing business. And what we want to do is make sure that we can make their process more efficient, provide their customers better services, as well as work with our partners in getting that done. So folks, hopefully we've answered a number of your questions. We're really looking forward to working with you. That wraps up our presentation. And now we'll open up the floor for some questions.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Dave. Really appreciate you bringing your expertise to this space. I think one of you mentioned an alphabet soup earlier, and especially as someone who hasn't worked in the public sector myself, blessed to be on the software side of things, it can be a confusing place to navigate. And my understanding is people at these organizations, sometimes are also confused trying to navigate the compliance frameworks that their specific agency or their specific project comes under. Sometimes you may be conducting a grant-funded survey of a certain population. If that grant has federal money, you may be required to use FedRAMP certified products, FedRAMP compliant products, and that can be a surprise for some agencies. So I appreciate you both bringing your expertise here. We do have a couple of questions, and this first one, Dave, I'm going to toss it to you, but I'm not sure myself. It's from Christina. They ask, does FormAssembly integrate with Highland OnBase? Not a platform I'm familiar with, but I wanted to throw this out there in case we have any knowledge of it.
Highland OnBase I am not familiar with, to be candid, and I'd rather take the time to do a bit of research on my end. But Josh, if you can pass along any contact information, I'd be happy to dig into that and get back to them after the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. And Christina, for certain platforms that we don't have a specific integration to, obviously FormAssembly, well known for our Salesforce integration, should work for Salesforce GovCloud. A question of like Highland OnBase, if you have an open API with that software, then FormAssembly should be able to integrate with that as well. We have a webhook connector that can handle multiple authentication requirements, multiple package compliances, things that you need to pass over. We can look into this, but that would probably be your best bet with integrating to that system. I have another question here. How does the TextRamp certification benefit state-level organizations looking to use FormAssembly? Dan, I know you've done some research onto this. What's your response here?
Well, TextRamp is, of course, Texas's own security functionality, and we, of course, support that. But you're going to find that some states don't really accept TextRamp. And even to some degree, the FedRAMP side. So what we've done is we've really done some serious homework from a standpoint of how states can basically work with us, regardless of whether they use TextRamp or they might have their own type of security service. What we do to answer that is we can provide your customer or the state with a very significant in-depth analysis that outlines our security formats and should answer a majority of your questions. But that being said, we really would look forward to, if you have additional questions related to a specific area, a specific state, we can essentially usually answer those questions from the standpoint of the security. So I guess what I'm basically saying is that TextRamp is not necessarily accepted by all the states. States have different they have different requirements on security. And what we've tried to do and make sure we do is that with FedRAMP High, which is the highest level of security from a standpoint of the government, we will work with your security people in answering any of the questions they have related to their specific security requirements.
Yeah, and a great call out there, Dan. In our resources center, for those customers who have documentation requirements when it comes to security and compliance, we do have our Trust Center where you can request access to documentation if you need it, actually managed by Dave's team, and that link is in our resource center. While Dan was answering that last question, one of our other attendees messaged me in the portal and said, and this is to Christina's earlier question, Matthew says, not a question, but we were able to connect FormAssembly with Hyland's perceptive content, which he believes to be similar to Hyland OnBase. I've reached out for some more information, but Christina, you may find that we can integrate with that system that you asked about. We have time for, I think, at least one more question. We'll try to squeeze these in. Dave, you might be the best one to answer this question. What's the difference in controls, security controls, pardon me, between FormAssembly's commercial product and the FedRAMP DoD offerings?
That is a great question, because usually in my day-to-day, I am looking things more at the security control plane and less the abstract name of the program it involves. So our commercial compliance space, they all fundamentally rely on NIST 853. But I guess one layer above that would be SOC 2 Type 2, PCI DSS, and ISO 27001 are the underlying controls that really frame out our commercial offering. FedRAMP and IL4 really expands upon that and offers a little bit of a different model based on how we offer that. Still based on fundamentally NIST 853, but where I think FedRAMP and IL4 are a little bit different is that it counts for a much broader subset of those control families, as well as very different operational procedures in terms of meeting one standard or another. So, what we do to say we meet a SOC 2 Type 2 audit and produce that report once a year is extremely different than the hoops we kind of jump through to demonstrate, but get to a similar end for FedRAMP and IL4, especially considering our partnerships in that space. But fundamentally, they operate from a similar set of controls. It's just that FedRAMP is much more expansive, much more specific, and much more nuanced in terms of the expectations of each control and what's really required for each.
Excellent, thank you. And again, I really appreciate the expertise you both brought to this session. It's one of these areas where I'm always learning more. If you'd like to learn more, audience, about any of our GovCloud specific offerings, those that offer compliance with FedRAMP High or DoD IL4 standards, I'm going to go ahead and throw up this poll. Feel free to toss a yes if you'd like our sales team to reach out to you and talk to you. I also understand that procuring software in the public sector can be a bit of a slow process. You may not even have an RFP open around a tool right now, but if you'd like more information, we'd be happy to get it for you. And as I mentioned, inside of our resource center for this session, we have some links to our sam.gov listing, as well as our security and trust center for more documentation. I'll go ahead and close the poll now, but do not feel like this is the only way to get in touch with FormAssembly. You can, of course, reach out to us through our website, but I do need to end this session so we can get our our attendees onto their next session for FormFest. Gentlemen, I want to thank you again, and audience, thank you for attending. We'll see you at the next session.
Thank you.